So I've not had a chance to really dig into bariatrics, and I don't know. I don't think I know anyone who's really, had a face-to-face encounter with, that process.
Mhm.
So could you tell me just a little bit about like what it is and what is the process of going through bariatrics or having that type of surgery?
Yeah, so bariatric surgery it was described to me as an umbrella term for a number of surgeries meant to be like support weight loss.
Hmm.
So it's medical intervention in regards to folks who are diagnosed with like obesity.
Hmm.
So bariatric can include a lot of surgeries. One that a lot of folks have heard of is the gastric bypass.
Yeah.
They used to do surgeries like the lap band. People may have heard that in pop culture. I feel like I remember hearing that, and that's one I don't think they do that as much anymore. And then the type of surgery I had was they call it the vertical sleeve gastrectomy, and sometimes it's known as the sleeve for short. But
Hmm.
essentially, what happens is, and it's going to sound kind of crazy,
It's all right.
but they cut out 80% of my stomach and removed that and created a pouch.
Uh-huh.
So that's why it's called the sleeve. So basically, my stomach's now a tiny little sleeve, if you will. It almost, I think when they show you the picture, it kind of is supposed to look like a banana or
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah.
Point of it being is it is a way to physically limit how much food you're able to eat,
Okay.
which then in turn leads to typically rapid weight loss for folks who've undergone that surgery. And it is a way to lose weight quickly. It's a way to get to a healthy weight.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it's meant to treat the diagnosis of obesity.
Wow.
Mhm.
So when you went through this process, or actually before you went through this process, were you like being consulted, or is this something that you just researched on your own and was like, okay, this could be an option for me?
Yeah, I looked into it myself. I've heard about it. My dad has also had the surgery.
Okay.
So I was familiar with the process.
Hmm.
And it's not funny, but I said it's funny. There's actually a really intense approval process. So it's
Oh,
not
okay.
something that you can, I mean, some people can,
Hmm.
if you have enough money. Of course, you can get whatever
Sure.
surgery you want,
Sure.
right? But for most folks, there is a really intense approval process through insurance.
Hmm.
And I think the idea of treating, and I'm using quotes like treating obesity with medical intervention is still kind of a newer conversation, right? If you
Hmm.
think about weight loss and obesity, a lot of times it's seen as a personal problem or a character flaw. It's like,
Sure.
well, you just need to eat less and move more. So,
Hmm.
and that's the mindset I grew up with. And
Yeah.
the thing that I feel like I struggled with most of my life. When I first looked into bariatric surgery, it was the first time I was like, oh, there are people out there who recognize this as a medical condition that sometimes needs help
Hmm.
treating. And here's a whole steps and surgery to help me get to a healthier lifestyle.
Sure.
So, just like if you had, a lot of times my doctor compared it to like if you were to have something like diabetes, like you get treatment, right?
Sure.
If you, I'm trying to think, but yeah, if you have a disease, if you have a medical problem, you go to a doctor, you get treatment. Sometimes that involves surgery. It's the same thing. But it was a really long process to get approved. So I had to prove that I have been on a weight loss program supervised by a doctor for at least 6 months.
Well, is that because they want to just make sure that you're in shape, or is that because they want to make sure whether you're actually trying to change your habits?
They want to make sure that I've tried everything I could
Mm.
on my own.
Oh, okay.
So that way it's not surgery isn't like, I want to go on a diet. Let me go get surgery. It's,
Yeah.
hey, I've tried.
Right.
I have tried a
Hmm.
lot of things. Like I had to think about all the diets I've tried. I had to list that out.
Hmm.
And I did do a medical program with my doctor previously where they were monitoring my weight loss, and I was doing a weight loss program. And so I had to submit all of that paperwork. I had to
Hmm.
see a psychiatrist to make sure that I had to have like a psych eval done to make sure that mentally I understood surgery and understood what I was taking on, but also was mentally sound to be able to successfully lose weight because it's such a mental process too, right?
Wow.
I'm trying to think. I had to do nutrition classes. Like it was a lots of things that you had to get marked off before you're officially approved to get
Sure.
surgery.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you came to this moment. What brought you to the moment where you
Mhm.
realized, like, okay, maybe I'm gonna try this surgery?
Yeah, I remember it. It was so I am right at 9 months out of surgery. I had it last November of 2023.
Okay,
And
it was
right before
recent.
then, I just remember hitting this point. It was about October of last year. I was, I think, the heaviest weight I'd ever been,
Hmm.
but I was also really active, and I've always been active. So at my heaviest weight, I've ran half marathons. I've been running 5Ks since college.
Yeah.
I was working out at a CrossFit gym, like lifting really heavy weight, but I still just could not lose weight. And I um, just felt really uncomfortable in
Hmm.
my body. And I was frustrated because I was tracking my food. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to be doing. And it just I wasn't seeing any success.
Hmm.
And so I hit that point where I was like, I just cannot keep doing this anymore. Like truthfully, I was really depressed. I was
Oh
not
wow.
happy with how I looked and how I felt. And I felt really, I think the best way to describe it is you just feel kind of hopeless. Cause like I said, I think a lot of times when you're struggling with weight, the typical answer and the answer I've received from doctors, friends, and family is like, well, why don't you just try to move more? Why don't you try to eat less? And I was like,
Hmm.
I'm doing these things.
Yeah.
Um, so that I think is just what pushed me to say, okay, there's got to be something else out there. Like I have tried to do this by myself and I just feel like I needed help.
Hmm.
And that's when I made the appointment to do the consultation. So
Okay. So, and from the consultation, like, what was the time frame? Like, was it like an immediate thing after you kind of got all of your paperwork and stuff?
I actually got approved really quickly.
Hmm.
And that's not typical. I think I first went in, I may have mixed up my dates. I think I first did my consultation at the end of September.
Hmm.
And then I truly, like, through the rest of September and October, I like when I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it. And
Hmm.
so my biggest priority was figuring out everything I needed to do to get surgery approved.
Hmm.
And they give you a checklist. And I remember I was sitting there like writing all my notes, checking everything off as
Yeah.
quickly as I could. So by the time I had my consultation, I then was approved like mid November, maybe. So it was a really quick process. And I think it was quick for me because I had previously had that documented, like they called it medically supervised weight loss.
Okay.
So had I not had that, a lot of folks, when they go through the process, they have to wait. Like there's like a 6 month waiting period where they work with a doctor and a nutritionist and they do this like weight loss program because the insurance wants to see that you've made attempts to lose weight on your own.
Sure.
So I think I was really lucky because I already had that documented.
Hmm.
Had I not, I might have had to wait another 3, 6 months. But I had it over like the Thanksgiving holiday last year.
Hmm.
Um, I took 2 weeks off of work and that was it. And
And you just, I mean, and so I mean, this brings me to my next question. Like, okay, I hear the process. I don't know what
Mhm.
the how long does the surgery take?
I think I was in and out in like an hour. Like it was really
Wow, is that
quick. My
fast?
surgeon was really fast. So I went in early morning. I'm trying to think. I was like, I may have gotten that wrong, but I just remember I went in early morning.
Hmm.
Maybe it was like 3 hours or something, but I just remember they said, your surgeon's super fast because I was back in recovery like before noon. So it was really fast.
Dang. So
Yeah.
did you immediately feel different, like after you had your surgery? Like post maybe a couple of
Mm,
days, did you immediately feel
yes.
the loss?
Well, the biggest thing I felt is I was not hungry. Like,
Okay.
and you have to, so after surgery, one of the big things you have to do is your water intake because you really, bariatric patients after surgery really struggle with dehydration.
Okay.
Because you think your stomach is now I could only maybe have a couple ounces of water at a time. Like I was drinking water in like 2-ounce intervals
Wow.
because that's how small it is and it's
Hmm.
healing and everything's swollen. So after surgery, that was the weirdest thing. And because you go from someone who's struggled with food issues their whole life, like I'm always thinking about eating,
Hmm.
to all of a sudden a 2-ounce little cup of water
Fulfilled.
fills me up and I can't even
Wow.
think about drinking anything else.
Hmm.
So that was like as soon as I got out of surgery and was back in the hospital room, they were trying to get me to drink broth and
Hmm.
have a sugar-free popsicle. And I was like, that makes me want to throw up. I can't even think about doing that
Yeah.
right now. So that was immediate.
Mm.
And I just remember it's so weird. It really messes with your mind.
Wow. That's, I mean, I've never had a surgery on anything.
Yeah.
But to hear that process happening so quickly,
Hmm.
and you immediately see a difference is like, wow, that's so. Is there a pain that you feel when you like are trying to recover? Like, what is that? What is?
I was in a lot of pain. I remember in the recovery room,
Hmm.
my stomach just hurt so bad, and so I do remember I was coming off the anesthesia and I was crying. I was like, which I
Oh.
said is normal. They're like a lot of
Hmm.
people cry. I cried, so I was crying and I was in pain, and then they gave me some medicine and I felt pretty good for a
Hmm.
while.
Yeah.
But I do remember the 2 weeks where I was recovering because you've got, so essentially what happens is it's, I'm trying to think of the word they use, laparoscopic is, I'm trying to think of
I've
all
heard
the
that before,
medical
but
terms
I
and I
don't
don't remember what it
know.
is, but it's where they take all these like robot arms and they basically make 5 different holes in your
Okay.
stomach. And that's how they do the surgery. So they don't just like cut you open and take it out. They go in through these small incisions
Hmm.
and then they'll pull out, this is so gross, but they'll pull out the stomach through one of those holes. So
Hmm.
I had all these little incisions and stitches, and that has to heal. So
Yeah.
not only did my stomach internally have to heal, but then all these little incisions. And I just remember the first time I had to sneeze post surgery, I was in so much pain because it just hurt so
Oh man,
bad. Everything
I
hurts.
imagine.
Um, it was so painful. So
Yeah.
laughing, I remember my family, we loved to laugh, and I was really blessed to have my family there I stayed with them and they helped me recover those 2
Hmm.
weeks, but we loved to laugh. And I remember I was like, y'all cannot make me laugh because I was in so much pain.
Yeah.
But that went away pretty quickly. It was about after the first week. I
Hmm.
wasn't as much soreness. And then honestly, what was really challenging in recovery is rebuilding your stomach muscles, like
Okay.
your abs.
Hmm.
So I remember when I started working out again, um, I couldn't do like core exercises. The first time I tried to do a crunch, I couldn't do it because they have to go in and it damages your ab muscles.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of like muscle rebuilding I've had to do as well. So it's an interesting process. And
Yeah.
now that I'm like reflecting, I was like, man, I can't believe I did all of that last year.
So, in terms of like the actual weight loss, was there like a number that you were trying to hit, or specific goals that you were trying to reach in terms of like
Hmm.
just weight in general?
Yeah. So with my doctor, and I love sharing my numbers. I know that's kind of taboo, but I
Yeah.
think it's important because when I started, I weighed 286,
Hmm.
and that was the highest I had ever been in my life. And I think it was that kind of shock moment of like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I've gained this much weight.
Hmm.
Through talking with my doctor, we both agreed 80 to 100 pounds is kind of where I want to aim for. And so right now, again, I'm about 9 months out. And I weighed this morning. I'm 1 pound away from hitting my 80-pound mark. So
Wow.
I've lost,
Goodness.
I say 80.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's
Thank
good.
you. I like to round up. So I've lost 80 pounds in about, I guess that's 9, 10 months. So really quick
Yeah.
time frame. But where I'm at now, it's, the weight loss happens really fast post surgery because you're just not eating a lot.
Hmm.
And now I'm at a place where I am able to eat more. So your stomach does stretch back out. It's a muscle. So it doesn't stay super tiny forever. I think that's a misconception about
Hmm.
surgery. People think, oh, well, you'll never be able to eat again. I'm like, well, that's the problem. I
Hmm.
can eat now.
Hmm. Right.
And so now I'm having to really confront a lot of the same issues that I had before surgery and having to deal with some of the like mental issues that come with being overweight and, call it what it is, food addiction or eating disorders, like that still is there.
Hmm.
Surgery didn't take that away.
So how do you cope with that? Because
Yeah.
I'm assuming I don't know any statistics about this, but I would question like I wonder how many people go back to the same habits that they have
Hmm.
before the surgery.
Hmm. I don't know the statistics either. I do know that that's a big focus with my surgeon is establishing healthy habits early on
Hmm.
because, yeah, to your point, yeah, if you don't, it's gonna come back.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks think, excuse me, there's a misconception that surgery is like an easy way out.
Hmm.
Oh, you had the surgery, of course you lost weight. It's like, well, yeah, I lost weight, but now I'm in a point where my focus is keeping it off and maintaining a healthy lifestyle
Hmm.
because surgery didn't change my brain.
Yeah.
Surgery just made it harder for me to overeat.
Wow. I mean.
And but where I was at, at almost 300 pounds, like that's what I needed.
Hmm.
I needed a physical limitation so that I could lose weight. And I like to call it kind of created a blank slate because as I said, I was already active. I was already working out. Working out was hard at almost 300 pounds. Like
Hmm.
my joints, I was always struggling with knee pain and back pain. And I didn't enjoy working out as much, but I did it. So some of those habits were there, but surgery basically gave me the ability to lose weight quickly, see that progress, feel that momentum.
Hmm.
And it just inspired me to keep going. Like I can't explain it other than it just feels good. You're like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, I'm finally like shedding this like physical and literal weight off my
Yeah.
body so that I can live the life that I've always wanted to live.
So there are things that you can do now that you couldn't do
Yeah.
before. Like what?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
I'm interested.
One of the coolest things. So I did run pre-surgery.
Hmm.
I like to run half marathons. I say I like. I liked the accomplishment.
Okay.
And we're gonna get deep because I think there's a thing where it was like I felt like as a plus size person, if I could still do crazy feats like run a half marathon
Yeah.
or lift a bunch of weight, then it's like, well, then I'm still healthy. Do you know what I mean? Like I was
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of like, it was a way to
I
prove to
get that.
myself, like, well, I'm good.
Hmm.
But what's fun now is I did a half in April and it's funny. I was like, I actually enjoyed it.
Hmm.
Like it was fun. It was fun and I felt so much lighter. And I ran my fastest half marathon
Right.
ever. And then this past weekend, I did a 5K again, PR'd my 5K or ran my fastest 5K. And again, it was fun. Like running doesn't hurt as much as it used to. It's actually enjoyable. I've been able to run with running groups because I can run faster. So running is now not something that I do by myself. I do it with community,
Hmm.
and that makes it more fun.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest stories is so something about me. I love Dolly Parton. I love Dollywood. All those
Okay.
things. Right. Right.
I've never been there. I've
Okay,
not been there. So
Dollywood. I am a gold season pass member. It is one of my favorite places
really.
in the world. But pre-surgery, and I think this kind of added to that wake up moment for me. There was two specific rides at Dollywood that I couldn't fit on,
Hmm.
and that's happened at theme parks before. You wait in line to get to a ride, and then you get up to the front, and you're like, oh, this doesn't fit my body. Like that's a wake up call,
Wow.
and that was really hard as someone who is adventurous and loves theme
Yeah.
parks and loves those kind of adrenaline like junkie type things, and then
Hmm.
physically being limited was hard. But Dollywood specifically, and I still love Dolly, even though these rides were not super size inclusive, but
Wow.
I couldn't fit them. And I remember I had lost at this point. See, this was back in earlier this year. So I say only, I'd lost about 40, 50 pounds at this
Hmm.
point, which was still a huge accomplishment. And I went back to Dollywood and I was determined to get on those rides.
Yeah.
And I think one of the coolest moments post surgery, like I was so anxious too. I was waiting in line to get on this ride and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I don't fit, I'm going to be so embarrassed. I'm going to be
Yeah.
so sad. But that moment you get on the ride, it clicks down and you're like, oh, I'm
I'm
good. Like
good.
I'm going to ride this ride. And so. And of course it's a very fast ride. It notoriously kind of makes you tear up anyway, but I'm literally crying on this roller coaster. And when
Wow.
I get off, the girl next to me, she said, "Oh gosh, that just makes your eyes water." And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure." And I'm just crying because I'm like,
Yeah. Wow.
I was so excited to fit on it. So that was a huge thing. And in that same trip, I went ziplining for the first time because that's another thing like I'd never been able to do because I was always over the weight limit. So you think of all these small things that maybe if you've never been overweight or struggled with weight, you don't think like, oh, wow, I never thought like that's limiting. But just even small things like going to a concert at Bridgestone and being able to fit into the seats comfortably, flying, being able to sit in an airplane seat comfortably, being able to do a workout and just not feel like you're dying
Right.
afterwards. Like I said, there's just so many small things that I continue to notice um, that I can do now that I've lost weight that I wasn't able to do before.
That's cool. And
Yeah.
I've never, now that I think about it, because you mentioned gastric bypass. My uncle actually had,
Mm.
I believe, I don't know, I think it was like a triple bypass or something. And you're saying 280, but he was twice that.
Yeah.
But he immediately went from, you know, up over, like definitely over 300, maybe 400, I don't know,
Yeah.
to being my size or smaller than me.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people look at that and they're like, that seems very dangerous. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, I think that's different than what you're talking about, but a lot of people don't realize that, I'm assuming within geriatrics, there's a lot, not geriatrics.
Yeah, I was
Bariatric.
like, that's not what
No.
I had.
Sorry.
It's okay.
My sister actually studies geriatrics in her psychology program. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Shout out to you, Kiana. But bariatrics, they don't realize that that's a category and things fit into there.
Yeah.
So it's not all like, okay, I've been, having these certain habits. I've gained a certain amount of weight and now I can't lose, so I want surgery. But there are other things within there that people don't even know exist. Like everything you're telling me right now is totally new to me. My wife is she's more, I think, interested. I just find interest in like watching videos and stuff about, things like the gastric sleeve. And there was a show that she was just super into at one point. I don't remember what it was called, but there was a lot of that in there. And you would hear the doctors kind of giving them the rundown of all these different things they need to do. But I think people in general sometimes assume that everyone just has a struggle with, like having unhealthy habits and then they can't lose the weight. Like they don't want to work out so they don't lose the weight. But what you're saying is it can be a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
How much do you think you probably attribute to like genetics?
I would say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I love my family, but we are
Mm.
I'll say I love my family and
but I don't.
we are we're a sturdy bunch on both sides. I'm like, we are Appalachian, like people who are meant to survive strong winters. And I feel like my body that carries on to that. Like I think it's my dad, especially like I take after my dad. My mom, she was thin before children. So sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to bring you into this, but my dad and I take after him and we are just larger folks. Like we hold on to weight. He had the same thing. Like I said, he had the surgery too. So I think it's a lot of genetics. And one thing I think about is like, I noticed as I got older, I'm 33, so I was 32 last year. As you get older, like your metabolism slows down. It's like my body was just not working with me. Even though I was doing all the things that people say to do, like eat less calories, move your body more, whatever. I was doing that and my body, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because of how much weight I needed to lose. So I might drop a couple pounds there, but in the scheme of things, like that's just a drop in a bucket. And it's like, okay, it's so easy to get unmotivated quickly when you're only losing 2 pounds at a time. And then what does that do? Well, if you're like me who a lot of the issues is genetics, but it is also the mental things that come along with food. You only lose 2 pounds. It's like, all right, well, then I'm going to spiral and I'm going to go to Taco Bell and
Mm.
have a binge sesh. And then
Wow.
you're back to where you started. Like it was a really toxic cycle for me
Mm.
that I could not get out of.
Mhm.
And surgery was that tool. And I always say it's a tool. It's like, it's not a quick fix. It's not a permanent fix, but it was a tool that enabled me to get this weight off so that I could now, where I feel like I am, do the work to break that cycle. Like I
Sure.
said earlier, like it's weight loss for me. I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me, it is so mental.
Mm.
Um, I really have struggled with eating disorder um, in the past, and a surgery isn't going to fix that,
Mhm.
right? So, and now that I've lost a lot of weight, but weight loss has slowed, and I feel like now I'm really having to confront the mental parts of why I got to 286 pounds to start with.
But how do you do that? Like what?
I was gonna say
So yeah,
therapy.
therapy. Okay.
Therapy
Mhm.
has been helpful, but it's a lot of like I just have to unpack things. I feel like one day at a time. Like I
Mhm.
really have to take it one day at a time. Um, and I'm not saying I do it perfectly because I feel like I still really struggle. But what I've been doing is I focus on journaling.
Mm.
I focus on the behaviors that my surgeon and my program said, like, these are the things you focus on. So getting enough water, getting enough protein, moving your body,
Mm.
getting sleep, and tracking your food. And I'm
Mhm.
like, if I can do those 5 things, it's a
Yeah.
good day.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of, I mean, it sounds like a lot of um, what I've heard about, like kind of other, not necessarily, I wouldn't say they're disorders, but other issues that some people have, like some who, have different addictions.
hmm
It's always overwhelming when you consider where you are and where you want to be and like all
Yeah.
those different things, trying to take it all on at, in one day.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that through journaling, and I journal also,
hmm
but I journal in like in a really weird way, because journaling is also like a struggle for
It
me.
is a
So
struggle for me
so
too,
so
but
yeah. So but I have to do it in a way that's like, okay, every day I'm going to dedicate myself to writing one sentence about
yep.
how I feel.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have one sentence that explains like who I'm
Mhm.
thinking about the most in that day. And so it's just really just something to keep me accountable for my day and just
Yep.
processing my feelings. And I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a disorder or anything that I'm not really bringing to the forefront, but there have been moments where I've just been overwhelmed by just looking at where I am and where I want to be and seeing like this
Mhm.
vast, like just it just seems like a big difference, and
Mhm.
sometimes it overwhelms me,
Yep.
so I think just taking it a day at a time is also something I
Yeah.
try to do myself too.
Yeah, and you mentioned addiction. I've actually and I hope this isn't like I don't want to offend anyone, but the way I do equate this is it is like overcoming an addiction. At
Hmm.
least that's how I can experience it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you can't do it all at once. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, I'm fixed, I'm healed. It
Hmm.
is a process and there's like a lot of layers to it. But one thing I remembered when I first had earlier when I was fresh from surgery, I guess. I remember talking
Hmm.
to someone who um, they said, "I am an alcoholic, and this is I'm sober, and this is what I do now." But they were talking about like there was a grieving process when they became sober, and I don't know why that was a light bulb. Like I had to grieve.
Wow.
I had to grieve the role that food played in my life, which is
Wow.
a weird thing. And I think if folks haven't gone through like what it means to have an eating disorder or have an emotional connection with food, like that may be hard to understand. But I was like, food was my comfort. Like food was
Hmm.
how I dealt with stress. Food was what I turned to when I was angry, when I was sad, lonely, like every
Hmm.
emotion. I wanted a little treat. and
Yeah.
and I still love a little treat,
That's cool.
you have to like there's a grieving process where you're like, "Oh, like I have to confront my emotions head on."
Yeah.
I can still enjoy food, but it looks different now.
Mhm.
And so that's why I say, like, when I take it a day at a time, it is, I think now has been really hard because I am feeling all of my feelings.
Mhm.
And the main way that I used to cope with that, I don't
Mhm.
have as a coping mechanism anymore.
Yeah.
So it's that's what I say. It's I'm in the mental part of it now. So
Mhm.
I'm not done losing weight. I still have a little bit more to go on. They call it the weight loss window.
Mm.
But I do think I'm in the thick of it where it's all right. I lost weight quickly in the beginning. It's not coming off as quickly now. And now I'm really having to confront those like hard emotional
Mm.
things that are typically tied with folks who overeat.
But this is something that you actually plan for, like
Yeah.
before you, yeah. So as I'm hearing this, I'm like, I feel like one of the things that I'm grateful for this interview for is I think a lot of people should kind of get an understanding of like the not just the broad things that change, like of course your physical appearance is going to change, and
Mhm.
wanting to eat or how you eat is going to change,
Yep.
but the more mental things that aren't necessarily seen, and everyone,
Mhm.
you're on the podcast right now. It's like we don't necessarily talk about these things,
Yeah.
at work, and unless you're, I guess, a really close person. But people need to know, like, it's much more than just having a surgery and being,
Yeah.
like, it's not a quick fix, because like
Right.
you said, mentally there are things that are now a part of my culture that I was doing every
Mhm.
single day,
Mhm.
even going to like trying to cope. And I'm like, when I heard you say that, I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds just like an issue that I've had in the past, where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna stop doing X, Y, and Z, but just because you stop it, that's just one part. Now you have to replace that,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think that some people will go into another addiction,
Mhm.
and it's like that now this addiction is new to you, but it still has the same effect as the
Yes.
other thing. Not to say again that this is addiction, I don't want to get
It's
in
okay.
trouble.
I would call it, I mean, I would call it I had a food addiction. It was
Hmm.
totally addictive. And my surgeon even um, kind of warned me about this concept called transfer addiction. And so this
Hmm.
is something bariatric patients, a lot of them face post surgery, is this the that same addictive behavior. Like it's an addictive personality, right? Like you're using something to cope with life, to cope with feelings, to cope with whatever. Like you're using food to fill that void.
Hmm.
That behavior, like if you allow it, something else is going to fill that. So a lot of folks post surgery actually do turn to alcohol, which it can be
Oh.
really dangerous because I was actually told I was never supposed to drink alcohol ever again, which I have, but I was like, sorry, but because your stomach's so small, like you can really overdo it
Hmm.
very quickly. But a lot of folks, bariatrics, have really struggled with alcoholism. Um, I will say me, I'm like exposing myself because I said I love a little treat. So now my thing is I like go to Target and buy myself a little treat when I feel like I need it. And I'm like,
Hey.
man, I cannot afford all these little treats. So shopping is a big one. Like there's just so
Hmm.
many other things. So I think a big part of the healing journey, and I kind of do call it like your healing, because it's 30 plus years of conditioning to live this way. So
Yeah.
you're building a new kind of sense of self through this
Hmm.
process. So I try to fill it with things that are maybe healthy addictions. Like I crochet a lot now.
Yeah.
I do a lot of crafting. I try to read a lot more.
Hmm.
I probably have, I think coffee is maybe my new addiction. Like if I'm wanting something, I make a coffee, but
Hmm.
it may not be perfect, but I try to tell myself like I'm at least making steps towards the person I want to be. Like it's not perfect, but it is progress. And
Yeah.
that's the theme that has carried me through this whole journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you're in a positive space right now.
I think you I think I have to stay positive.
Hmm.
Otherwise I would probably spiral because it is
Oh.
just such a huge life change. And
Hmm.
again, it's been under a year, like so much change in under a year. And that's not even counting for everything else you have to deal with in life,
Hmm.
like job, friends, family, community. Like that's stress in and of itself, this is just one aspect of my life, and it's um, definitely kind of consuming. So I really try to stay positive. I really focus on the wins, like
Hmm.
thinking about all the things that I can do now that
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do before. Um, and I think one thing that's just carried me through is like giving myself grace, because
Hmm.
again, it's not going to be perfect,
Yeah.
but it's still really good. And I feel like it's a weird feeling. I feel like a version of myself that I haven't known before,
Wow.
but it feels so authentic and so much like the real me. Even though
Hmm.
it's like, hey, this still feels like a new person, I'm like, oh, this is the me that I was meant to be.
Mm.
And that's, I think, what kind of grounds me and carries me through the tough days.
Wow, that's cool. I've learned so much just from hearing this. First of all, I've learned what bariatrics is.
Yeah. Bariatric, not geriatric.
Bariatrics. I understand now that there's a whole planning process behind or before you even get the surgery and
Yeah.
with like consultation and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I've learned that the journey is not over once the surgery is over.
This really just begins.
It just begins.
Yeah.
And it's like that whole self that you grew into before,
Mhm.
a sense of that is going to change,
Mhm.
whether big or small, and I think that's important. I've learned that there's a grieving process
Yeah.
to this, that's huge because grief is, I had someone on the podcast talking about grief before, and I was like, I don't feel like I've ever really, before I thought grief was just tied to like death,
Yeah.
but grief is like tied to you losing something,
Mhm.
whether it be a person or a lifestyle,
Yeah.
and that's a part of this as well.
Yeah.
Um, and staying positive is important. So I think from this, just from speaking with you, I've learned so much from something that wasn't even necessarily on my radar,
Yeah.
but now it's like I don't have to go into conversations with people and be ignorant,
Yeah.
about like the challenges and some of the
Mhm.
positive things that come from this. So I think that's super important.
Yeah.
How often do you like have a chance to tell people about this journey?
Um, I like to tell folks whenever I can. I
Mm,
think for me, that's my way of maybe destigmatizing
mm,
the value of medically supervised weight loss or medical intervention. Because for
mhm,
me, I wish I had known about this earlier. I honestly wish I had surgery earlier in life and maybe
mhm.
not gone through as much heartache. I mean, I am the person I am because of it,
Yeah.
but I think there's so much stigma when it comes to weight loss. Like I said, a lot of times it's viewed as a moral failing. Like, oh, well, you aren't losing weight because there's something wrong with your discipline, or you're
Mhm,
not losing weight because you're lazy. But it's so much bigger than that. And so I like to, I share my story on my social media. I'm
mhm.
very open about the fact I had surgery because I also don't want to create an unrealistic expectation. I don't
Sure.
want people to see, like, oh, wow, she's lost a lot of weight. And I've
Mhm.
had folks at work come up like, man, what are you doing? You look great. I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I did. Someone cut out my stomach because I was eating too much.
Yeah, it's a lot behind the scenes going on.
But it's like, I want to be honest because I think that creates a realistic expectation. It's like, hey, I couldn't do this by myself and I
Mhm.
needed help, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And like, here's all the great things I was able to do because of that. So I think this is the first time I really sat down and told a lot about the process.
Mhm.
But
There's more coming.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you
So
you figure, because I think a lot of people are going to benefit just from hearing this, but also seeing that journey, going through, the journaling process, going
Mhm.
through the lifestyle change and the mentality change. All of that
Yeah.
is, those are things that people don't regularly hear about from
Mhm.
other folks who, might be close to them or, close by to them.
Mhm.
I think it's important that people continue to hear things like this, and I also
Yeah.
think it's important that people continue to share things like this too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's somebody just like you who wants to understand this process, who might, shy away from doing the surgery or
Mhm.
any one of the types of surgeries there are,
Mhm.
um, because they just go by hearsay, um,
Yeah. Or they feel embarrassed
or feel embarrassed.
to
Yeah.
reach out and ask about it. But yeah,
Hmm.
if anything, like, I want to normalize it. And I think to your point, maybe not everyone can relate to needing bariatric surgery, but I
Hmm.
think everyone can relate to feeling like you need support and that
Yeah.
you can't do, like, it's okay that you can't do something by yourself. Like,
Right.
I think that's the lesson, is like, it's okay to say, I can't do this on my own.
Hmm.
I need to get support, whether medical, whether, spiritual, whether through a community, like, what
Yeah.
support do I need, and let me reach out
Hmm.
and not feel like I have to do this by myself. I
Wow.
think that's the big lesson there.
That's perfect. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on
Thank
to the
you.
podcast. We're gonna be expecting your TED Talk coming out soon. Whenever it is, like I said, there are people who want to hear things like this, who want to understand
Awesome.
the process, and I think you should share more
Yeah.
for sure. So
Well, thanks for providing the
we'll,
space to share. This was so fun.
yeah, so we'll be waiting on your podcast,
Mhm.
and all of the videos that you're gonna have on social media.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah.